Oh man, so it's a pleasure, man. We got, man, somebody I consider a Fort Worth legend on Rico TV, man. Can you let them know who we got today?
Tegan Broadwater, good to see you, man. Appreciate you.
Man, first off, I want to thank you for giving us some of your time today. I think, hey, I consider you a hero. Somebody who's, you know what I mean, who cares about our community, and we're going to get into all of that. But the way I like to start off is I first like to ask, like your upbringing, like where are you from? Like where were you born?
Man, I was actually born in the Motor City, but I'm an old dude, so they just burned the downtown to the ground, and so my parents just decided this is probably not the greatest place to raise a kid in Detroit. So they bolted, and as a little kid, man, I moved every 2 years, it seemed like, almost until I hit about high school, and then I was in Houston there. So I was weaned pretty much junior high school in Houston. I lived in Austin in the early 70s. So I lived in Texas a lot of those years, but I also lived in Kansas City and Connecticut and Florida and Jersey and Detroit. And so my dad was just nomadic, man. He'd get into a project, conquer it, and feel like he wanted to move on. So as a kid back in those days, though, when there's no internet and you couldn't make long distance calls, I mean, I'd meet these friends, and then, a year and a half later, I'd say, adios, I'll never see you again. So it made me really anxious, and, because I'm kind of introverted, so every new place I would move, it would just, cause me stress. But H-Town was basically where I was weaned, and then I came up to the North Texas area to study music at North Texas back in the day.
Okay. So music pretty much led you to North Texas, pretty much. First off, I know you said you're from Detroit. You're not a Lions fan, are you?
No, but this would be a good day to be one, but no, I'm not.
Yeah, nah, bro. I was gonna say, y'all, if you were, they definitely did a number on us. So, one thing that, because you've got a lot of content out there, right? If you follow Tegan Broadwater, you pretty much, know probably the biggest event that you've been involved in. But I wanted to kind of go into some of the stuff that I don't think was talked about enough. And we're going to get into that. But as far as you getting into police work, right? How did you become a police officer?
Man, it's kind of random because like I said, I was a musician by profession. I was on the road a lot, and when I was home, I had about 75 private music students, and so I made my living doing music. But then I had a son, and also was starting to get really burnt out by the music business, where you're touring through all these little towns and trying to bring in X amount of people to these clubs, these cokehead club owners. And it was really just getting to me, touring in an 87 Suburban with a little trailer just isn't the way to go. And so I had actually a following of, one of my bands had a following of several cops that used to come out all the time. And I just got to know them as I did anybody that was interested in the music. So ultimately, when I said, hey man, I'm really contemplating what to do, since fourth grade, I'm just destined to be a rock star. And when a question mark hit my mind, I had never in my life fathomed doing anything else but music. So I brought it up to them. They really politicked hard to get me into police work, and I thought, man, I never thought about that. Obviously, it sounds really interesting and sounds exciting. And with my experience playing with multicultural bands too, most of the groups I played with and the sessions I did were where I was the minority in the group. I felt like, man, I could really fit into an undercover role because all my friends and associates are really diverse, and I feel like I could fit into that thing. So even back then, when I first signed the dotted line, having zero experience, I thought that would be something I could really excel at.
Right. Okay. So, did your first police job, was it here in Fort Worth?
Decided to apply. I applied in Houston and Fort Worth got back to me soonest. So I jumped right in.
Okay. And just like on my channel, I've kind of covered all aspects of the history of Fort Worth. So you don't have to necessarily date yourself if you don't want to. But as far as the climate of Fort Worth, because I have a buddy who's a cop too. And what I hear from him is it really depends when you come out of training or class or whatever. It depends on what part of the city where you're working. So what first off, where were you working? And then, like, as far as the side of the city, and then two, like, what was the climate of Fort Worth at that time? Like, what was the I would say the makeup?
Okay, yeah, sure. I think it's similar in any large city. I got cut loose on the northeast side, so the Woodhaven, Brentwood Stair kind of area, which was at the time still having some problems. They had just transitioned into some Section 8 housing in there and stuff. So I felt fortunate that I was in a place where I could actually fight crime and make a difference, as opposed to some of my classmates got, put on an affluent side of town on the west side, and all they did was work traffic accidents and an occasional burglary. But, I was going in and tagging dope and guns and getting into chases and all that stuff, which was kind of the objective for me. I really wanted to learn how it worked and get some real street experience. And so from the day I put my 2 feet on the ground, I actually started putting in paperwork to try to go further south so that I could work the southeast side, down Rosedale, Vaughan, Vickery, all those streets, because that's really where a lot of the problems still existed. And I know through the 90s, those were problematic areas, and that's when I jumped in. So I, within short order, was able to get transferred down there to even a more problematic area, which is where I kind of learned the perspective. Because again, I already had a respect for different cultures and understood it, but man, when you start working amongst these folks like this, you realize how many people are just trying to make it, and they're just victims to these jerks that are, trying to gangbang and cause all this issues, to where they have to, walk their kids to school and can't do normal things that you would in a neighborhood, and they don't have enough money to just up and move. So it's a real conundrum for the good people trying to make it the right way.
No, for sure. So, you said the 90s. So, and it's also interesting because, the way I hear it from him, nobody really wants to work those areas, but you actually wanted to go down pretty much in the hood.
Oh yeah. Oh, for sure. I mean, I really wanted to get in and get experience, and, I felt a little less intimidated. I didn't know anything about police work, honestly, other than the training I got. So a lot of it was, just a personal endeavor of mine, just to learn and get good at police work. And you're not going to get good at police work if you're only getting called out to minor calls here and there. So this was call to call to call. If you're not on a call, there's stuff you can do to be proactive and find stuff. Or, stolen car every time. You're always running back and forth to the jail with different things. You get to know people that also would share information and become kind of friendly with you, so you kind of understand the disposition of some of the guys that weren't necessarily criminal, but were low income and struggling and trying to make it. You start having conversations with those guys, and that was something really familiar to me already, because I used to, go to band rehearsals in the ward in Houston, and I didn't even think anything of it. I tell people that's where I rehearse now, and they're like, dude, like, you went in and out of the ward. I said, well, yeah, but I was 16. I didn't know, and everybody was accepting and warm and welcoming, and it had nothing, race was only a conversation we had that made for a real interesting learning experience for it. It wasn't even ever any issue at all, because I was hanging out with good people.
Right. No, that's very interesting. So, one of the most famous parts, and I'll date myself, I'm 34.
Okay.
So I'm growing up I grew up in Forest Hill. So my family's from the north side, family all over Fort Worth. So I'm what you would call, I guess, shielded from it all. Like I was out there, and I see it, and I'm in it pretty much, but I'm shielded. So with that said, we hear a lot about the famous Murder Worth era, right?
Yeah.
When gangbanging took on the city, and it was supposedly just so many murders. What was it like being a police officer and fighting crime during those days?
It was super interesting. And again, running and gunning was, what I looked forward to. I mean, back then, I don't even know if it's politically incorrect, but I know maybe it is politically incorrect, but, people got into police work to run and gun and take bad guys to jail. That's what they always say. Hey, I want to put bad guys in jail. Honestly, I don't see anything wrong with that, because you're talking about bad guys specifically. You're not just wanting to put people in jail. But the police practices that were in place at the time were still pretty old school. So it caused a lot of dissonance and issues between some of the community if you were the type of cop that wasn't particularly friendly and engaging to the people that weren't committing the crimes. You got a very few people that would cooperate. You'd hear gunshots and I'd see some guy running and then I'd go latch a hold of him and then he would want to fight me. And I'm like, dude, I've just heard gunshots. I need to make sure it's not you or make sure you're not a victim or whatever. And trying to explain the circumstance because there was so much animosity between the community and the cops and obviously between the bad guys and cops. But I felt like I wasn't really affected by it because I didn't know any different. I didn't grow up in those neighborhoods, so I knew there was high crime there, and so I put myself in there on purpose. I don't know that I had a perspective to say, well, hey, in the mid '80s, this wasn't anything like this. So I was just super excited to do it and find creative solutions. Some of those bad guys that just really felt like they wanted help, and you find out that they're addicted to something or they have a different problem. And then trying to find creative ways to do something besides take them to jail or something and really, have some kind of impact. You just leave a wake of a handful of people behind that hopefully will have a better perspective on cop work than before. Then that's kind of the goal. So, but I loved the running and gunning. I was you learn how you're pulling people over all the time, getting in chases all the time, getting in fights all the time. But I think a lot of that was also born of the way that they trained police officers to do their jobs at that time also, if that makes any sense.
Wow. Okay. That's actually a very interesting perspective. As far as, right, your perspective at that time of these neighborhoods, right, of the people, because one thing I like about you that I guess I already knew, but that you just showed me was that we can forget politically correctness for a little bit. We just gonna say things how they are. You know what I mean? And I don't know if this is politically correct to ask, but at that time, do you view black people a certain way, or are you able to filter out like, okay, this is who's who, pretty much?
So that's an easy question for me, but I have a perspective from different people also. Because so obviously, like I said, being weaned in the music industry where, I was playing amongst black groups almost exclusively, I felt like I had no issue at all. And I knew that that's where crime was happening. And it endeared me to some of the people to recognize that the people that are trying to do good are suffering from all the people that are doing bad. And those people that are doing bad are a minority. They're a small percentage of those, but they do such bad things that it makes it dangerous. I was warned by someone who learned that I was going to get into police work. And they said, if you work in those areas, you're going to become a racist. You're going to learn to hate people. And I felt like I felt insulted that they would even say that to me, but I hadn't had the experience yet. And so now that I get in there and I start working, I realize you can go one of two ways. You can get down there and think, wow, there's a lot of black people. Well, no crap. This is primarily the area I worked was black and Hispanic. That's just the populace. It has nothing to do with all of the crime comes from one particular thing. But I can see where if you didn't have a good perspective and really went out of your way to try to learn about the people and understand the culture and understand the disposition or understand the history that put people there, or understand that it's way more of a socioeconomic issue than it is a racial issue by a million miles, then obviously you have a good perspective. But not everybody's going to have that perspective. Some of those guys will go in there and start working and realize, man, these guys are committing crimes all the time, and then they associate it with a race, and it just ingrains bigotry, even if it's subconscious, into some of those people. And I'm not saying I knew tons of bigots, but I know there are plenty of them out there, plenty. I don't think it's I don't think it's most, but I definitely think there's enough to where it's still a problem.
Right. No. That's an awesome perspective. And it touched me that you realize it pretty much. It's more of a socioeconomic thing. Like, I can't remember who it was, but they kind of approached me and said, well, you could see a white man, right? And you could see him look a certain way. And, in a certain area, And that by itself would trigger that would pretty much trigger something with you, just like if someone who felt that way about black people felt, seeing someone black. So that made me realize that it's not necessarily race. It's where you at, where you're growing up, what resources you have.
Yeah, I have I always tell people about like an avatar when I'm talking to people. I say, so I'm going to say something, and I want you to be honest with yourself about the first thing that comes to your mind, the actual picture. And I'll say, a black person. And a lot of what comes to mind when you're constantly in the trenches and taking people to jail, when you say, hey, this guy's going to come over, he's a black dude, and then immediately in someone's head they think of some kind of thug criminal, well, that's a problem, because that's not most black people. But that's where that bias comes from. And it's the same, I guess, I'm sure with whites or anybody else, where you have a bigoted white, or they're all rich, or they're all whatever the stereotype is. But that's where you get some of that from cops. They just become tainted because that's what they see so often, and they're less familiar with the culture because they're white.
But one of my big homies, I'll call him, who actually suggested when I started my platform, like, you need to get him, is Charleston White. And one thing I like about his style is how honest he is when it comes to our race. And when it comes to our race, part of that reason too is we have to take some responsibility. Those are the images that we portray as well. Those are the images we celebrate. Those are the images that we typically, even in black movies, black music, we kind of take on that image. So you're correct. It's not all of us, of course, but that's mostly what we broadcast, that we give off, that, okay, we're all gangster, we all tough, we all, do crime pretty much. So, okay. So boom, you're doing police work in that area. You're gaining a perspective. Now, let's talk about the Fishbowl for a moment, right? Because, and I know you're probably sick and tired of talking about it, but just for my section of viewers who may or may not know anything about it, what was the Fishbowl?
Well, the Fishbowl was it's a term deemed by law enforcement. First of all, we were the ones that gave it that name, and it's a 6x6 block area with one way in, one way out. They had lookouts out there. It was a gang den, essentially, run by a particular family, and they had two of the sides of the neighborhood divided up, and were dealing dope out of both sides. The quantities were coming in from Poly. That's before we even knew that, but cops couldn't go in. Cops were going in 2 men deep, and you couldn't just go in and just try to, dip your toes in the water and try to make buys. Man, they were pretty ruthless, and they were pretty sensitive about who they sold to. But it was also, the people that they sold to were in large quantities. So it was just a bad spot. And eventually, the violence got so bad out there that the city councilman rose a stink, and it got to the police chief, who said, spare no expense. I want to run warrants. I want to do jump outs. I want, people pulled over to find out what's going on there, and just, saturate the area. And as fast as that thing got approved, all these people working overtime, doing all this stuff, everybody kept hitting dry holes. They'd go hit a warrant, then nobody was in the house, or they'd, get no information because nobody's talking. And it was the same old tactics, and, it just wasn't working. It was just more of it. And that's what gave me the idea to think, man, you need to do this from the inside out. And so, when I came up with the idea originally, I had already garnered several years of experience in working some undercover work. And I even had a targeted list of people in the gangs from that neighborhood and surrounding areas too, that I kind of already felt like were projects of mine. So, I thought it'd be a great adventure to go in as the undercover and infiltrate the Crips. And, I brought it up to one of my informants over a sip of whiskey, and he laughed his ass off. And I brought it up to my sergeant, who also laughed his ass off. And but both of them knew that I was capable of doing it, and listened to my proposal. And I even went to my wife and said, look, I'm going to jump into this thing, but I need you to have my back, and it's going to maybe take 2 or 3 months to get it all the way through, which, I didn't know how long it was going to go at the time. I thought that would be like the max, and so of course I needed her to kind of have my back too, because it was going to be a little more of an extraordinary experience being undercover full time for that amount of for that period of time. But that's what launched it, because again, that part of the neighborhood was even a greater illustration of how a poor neighborhood is held hostage by violence and crime and gangs who claim that they're protecting the area, and all they do is torment the people by bringing crime and the crime element into their front yards. So that is how, I mean, it's not how I found out, because I'd actually answered calls down there. I dealt with some of the families that I ended up getting really in deep with. I'd actually answered family violence calls at their houses and had to remove the children and bring them into an aunt's house because people are pulling knives, there's blood on the floor, and people have to go to jail. And so I'm just looking at these kids being tormented, and those kids end up being some of the players in the Fishbowl years later. So I witnessed the terrible goings on early. And so I recognized the significance of that neighborhood. I just didn't know. I knew a lot of the key players. I didn't know how deep it ran. I didn't know how organized it was and all that kind of stuff. And that's, you just find that out as you start climbing the ladder.
Right. Okay. So one of my favorite pieces of content from you, and I'll link it below, is when you talked about starting the process. I thought like you're so good at telling it that I could see it all, so you can summarize it and briefly kind of let us know on here, but what was your game plan as far as starting to infiltrate this organization?
Yeah, so the game plan was that I was going to pose as a big time dope supplier that had my supplier was busted by the feds. So I was some kind of kingpin in South Texas and was now working on the west side trying to get my game started again because my source was knocked down. And so by being from the west side and working on the east side, I thought I would be an asset and an opportunity as opposed to competition. And I leveraged my own personality, just thinking, man, the best way for me to really do this is if Tegan, really decided, man, I want to start moving some keys and see how successful I can be at it. And if I really personally decided to do that, how would I do it? And so that's how I kept my personality kind of close to the vest also. But starting at the bottom is really what I had to do. So I'm literally pulling up, the first time we pulled up I grabbed an informant, and we went in with me in the passenger seat posing as a guy that's going to help him get his hustle back. So he's the one doing the deal. We pull up because all these, you got these dudes, moving hard at the corner that are just low-level street dealers. And so when they come and start asking me a bunch of questions, I say, you don't have to ask me shit. I'm here for these folks over here. This is the guy that I'm trying to help out. You got to hook him up. He's trying to get his hustle back, and I'm just helping him out. So the deals would go down right next to me, and I would pull a wad of money off and give it to him, and they'd see me with the money giving him the funds, and he would make the deal. And then all of a sudden people became a little more curious. They're still really apprehensive about me and asking questions, but I just went in confidently like, hey man, I know what I'm doing, and I don't play with people at your level. So at that point, when I was telling people no, which is obviously something a cop working undercover usually doesn't do, because you try to get every deal you can. This wasn't a dope case to me. So these small timers coming on and say, man, you ought to do a little business with me, this and that. And I say, no, man, I don't play in those realms. I just do the powder, and these guys were doing crack. So eventually I would talk to them a little bit and say, hey man, give me a yard, and I'll see if I can move it on my side. And, you just keep me in mind if I, need to talk to somebody or whatever. And ultimately I would gain their trust, and they would start introducing me to other bad guys up the chain in order for me to get what I needed, because obviously they had to go over their own heads to get the powder coke, because, people 2 levels above them are the ones cooking it and then handing it way down the line. So that's just in a nutshell kind of how I ended up working kind of up the chain, is that I was constantly shooting for powdered cocaine that I needed on the west side.
Wow. So, one thing that struck me when I listened to your interview, when you talked about how you kind of did it all, was, because me, I know, and you probably know this because you worked as a police officer for years, but a lot of the times, and once again, just skipping being politically correct, the first thought is like, man, a white boy over here, like, you know what I'm saying? Like, that originally would raise flags, I would think.
Yeah. Oh, for sure. I mean, I had a lot of hurdles to cross, and a lot of it was just my confidence, my swag, and the fact that I immediately, by my disposition that I was in, by saying, hey man, I'm a big timer, I got my source busted, and I'm just trying to help this fool out over here, but I'm looking way beyond you. I think when people see an opportunity and they think about ways to make money, they try to convince themselves that it's okay. And that's ultimately what happened. And I don't think that has anything to do with dope dealers. I think that has to do with business and everything else. If somebody feels like, man, there's an opportunity for me to make some cash on this particular deal, your mind is trying to convince you to do it, even though you're trying to go through the stages of questions. But as most people know, you start asking me 20 questions, where I'm at, where I live, who I work with, all this stuff. What kind of righteous dope dealer is going to talk about that anyway? So I was like, man, you're a fool. You think I'm going to talk about that? This is why I don't deal with people like you. And then they'd say, oh man, we'd start having a conversation, and I would start spending time. I had this teeny little budget. So I would just spend time down on the blocks asking for someone who I knew was gone, so that I had an excuse to just sit and chat with folks. I'd bring a couple magnums down there, we'd share about that, or, jump in a game of Madden or something like that, and then spend time just being around without having to spend money, because most of the stuff I bought in the beginning were all sample stuff, because we didn't have much of a budget to work with. I was spending my team's budget the whole time, and eventually, we had to spend real money in order to continue to move up the chain, and that's when, I got assigned to the FBI, and they started, providing me with all their resources and cash and stuff like that, so I could actually move up on the legit tip.
No, that's smart, man. One of my favorite, like I remember watching it and thinking, like, man, he's smart, he's cold, because you talked about what you were wearing, right?
Yeah.
One of the first times, and you said something about TCU Hat. And that's, to me, is brilliant, because being here in Fort Worth, if you see, I'll say this: the reputation of TCU kids or anything like that is that they got money and they looking for it. Mm-hmm. So that's smart for you to play on that. I also seen you kind of, like you mentioned it here briefly, but there was a time a guy asked you for an ID, and you kind of flipped it back on him, like, well, would you show me your ID?
Yeah.
Like, and that was smart, because even if I put myself in his shoes, and I'm like, well, damn, you're right, I for sure wouldn't show you my ID.
Hell no, you wouldn't.
So yeah, you played on that. So one of the things that also made me respect you a ton is you did this whole operation, but you actually care about the fatherless kids that were left behind.
Oh man, yeah. Look, I'll be honest, I started it with the neighborhood and salvaging the good people within that little bitty neighborhood. The operation blew up way outside of the neighborhood and all the way into Poly, all the way to the Crip turf border at Miller Street. But at the end, when this whole thing blew up and people started to figure out who I was, people started trying to encourage me to write a book. Man, you need to write a book about this. I'm thinking, why? Like, what's the purpose of writing a book? I experienced all this stuff already. I've been through it. I've got out the other side, and I'm not looking to poke bears or turn myself into something I'm not. And then when I made the discovery during the period where we were doing debriefs, and we were asking, I remember one guy had 3 kids within the past year, 3 different mothers, and he couldn't remember how to spell one of their names, and one of the other ones he didn't know what the middle name was. And I was thinking, man, all these kids are out there. We started tallying it, And this operation, we rounded up 51 people, 41 went fed and 10 went state. And then we had 104 kids then that were fatherless. And that's what the perspective was for me that made me realize what I did was absolutely important and pivotal, but it absolutely does not solve the problem unless you mentor and coach the kids that are left behind so that they don't continue the cycle of violence, which is the whole problem. So, if we just left that alone, then you're going to have some other cop in 18 years have to go through and do another infiltration and, put all these people behind bars, when in reality, if you start mentoring those kids 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 years old, then by the time they get out in those streets, they know they have better opportunities than what they're seeing. And then they know they have more integrity than to take this over that, or the confidence to say no, and the ability to know how to do a perfect job interview. And, they knock out their homework. I mean, they're just mentored and tutored through that entire process. And you don't have people that fall into the hands of those gangs, at 8th grade or whatever it is. And so that's what motivated me to write the book, and which was a whole another challenge in and of itself. Actually writing a book is not as easy as it sounds. It took me years to actually write this book, but we donate all the profits of the book to charities that mentor children of incarcerated parents for that reason, because that was the purpose of the book. I mean, look, I was a musician by profession, so I was smart enough to know too, you don't write a book to get rich. You don't make music to get rich. I mean, some people can, but realistically, that's not what happens in the creative industries, right? So I thought, well, not only am I not getting rich anyway, but maybe with a real purpose behind it, people will be motivated to maybe buy the book. And if they don't like it, they know that the money that they spent on it went to a good cause. And if they do like it, maybe they'll share it with other people, and we can actually expand this out and get some funding for some of these programs that are really doing the real work down in the neighborhood.
Yeah, man, that, like I said, that's probably the biggest thing to me, because I'm not gonna lie, informants, cops, all of that in the black community, which is something that I'm kind of trying to do my part to work to change, is something that's frowned upon. And
I get
for
it.
you to care about black kids, period, bro. Like that means a lot, man. So one of my last questions before I get out of here, we're gonna talk about kind of present day things, and from a perspective of somebody like you who's an ex-cop or whatever. Right now, a lot of Fort Worth's gang politics are playing out on the internet. And what kind of rose my antenna when you were telling your story is that you knew who people were, and this is back before the internet. So, do the police know what's going on? Like, and I'm not saying that in a way like, I more so want to confirm that, like, guys, people are like, you're not as anonymous as you think. You know what I mean?
For sure. Yeah, it doesn't take a genius to follow some of these cats and then just create a case from it. I worked in a period of time where everything was really serendipitous, and it was a transitional time where even some of the equipment, surveillance equipment and stuff barely worked. And so I didn't, that stuff, I didn't wear wires and do all that stuff. It was all messy. These days, man, not only has the culture of cops changed, and that's a whole another podcast maybe, but I think it's a lot easier, because it, like you said, they're just putting their business out there and trying to get attention from it, and they're getting some positive attention from other people who appreciate that kind of stuff. But all that's doing is putting them all in a big group, saying, here's the people viewing it, here's the people making it, and then you just let the cops just cast a wide net and pull it right in. It just seems like it's pretty easy, especially with the technology that you have back of house, that you can pull information from that stuff with subpoenas and stuff. So, yeah, I think it's crazy. But it resembles the time that when I was working, where everybody tatted themselves. So you get up into somebody and you hem them up, and then they've got 5 deuce across their chest. Then you don't have to ask them if they're gang affiliated or not, because they should just advertise it, and they started getting away from that once they realized, man, this is getting us convictions. So I just think this is another version of that.
Do they monitor social media?
Oh yeah. Now I think people back then and now overreact and think, man, they're tapping my phones. I can't talk on the phone, this and that. Man, most of us are not nearly as important as we think we are. So they're not interested in my stuff or your stuff or some of these other guys' stuff unless you're just really a key player, because it's not easy to tap phones and do all that stuff, but it's super easy to monitor social media, and I guarantee you they're doing that. Yeah.
Right. Okay. So, man, I think I'm gonna wrap it up there. Hopefully we can do this again. I kind of want to, kind of go a little bit more in depth, but I just, number one, want to thank you, man. Thank you for caring about my community. Thank you for, the time that you did serve. And, thank you for being willing to talk about it online too, and give people like me a startup channel a chance, bro. Yeah,
well, shoot. And, I've been there. I'm still trying to hustle it too. And you have great questions, and I'm glad that two people can say, hey man, it doesn't get better until two of us from the other sides of the fence will actually have a communal conversation about, trying to keep things together and tackle some of these sensitive issues. So I have a great appreciation for what you're doing.
Yes, sir, man. Thank you. Rico TV. We love y'all. We out.